starting then.
Yeah, I guess we can start.
Okay. You're ready to go. Have a good session.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everybody to the second half of the cryptanalysis session. Well, there will be 3 talks. Again, please feel free to ask any questions in the Zoom chat. And let's start immediately with the cryptanalysis of full LMC and LMCM with algebraic techniques by Fukang Liu, Takanori Isobe, and Videmaya. And Fukang Liu will give the talk.
Thanks for the introduction. So can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a joint work with Takanori Isobe and Videmaya. So LMC is a family of block ciphers first proposed at Eurocrypt 2015, and it is designed to be MPC and FHE friendly. The main feature of LMC is that there are 5 layers, linear key schedule functions, and the number of S-boxes per round are all not fixed. The most important application of LMC is the picnic signature, which was proposed at ACM-CCS. The security of the picnic signature relies on the security of the LMC primitive. Specifically, it should be difficult for an attacker to efficiently recover the key from a single plaintext ciphertext pair of LMC. Currently, in Picnic 3, the 4-round LMC with a 4 S-box layer is adopted in order to reduce the verifying and signing time. In addition, Picnic 3 is an alternate 3rd-round candidate in NIST post-quantum computation. We noticed in the security proof of Picnic that it is assumed that LMC with 2 non-plaintexts is secure. In this work, we will show how to break some LMC instances with 2 chosen plaintexts. This is an overview of our attack framework based on the difference enumeration attack. As the first step, we compute a deterministic differential trio for the first R0 rounds by exploiting the fact that only a few number of S-boxes are used per round. At the second step, if there are many available plaintests, we can try to find a pair of them such that there is no active S-box in the last R3 rounds. Of course, in our attack with 2 plaintexts, R3 equals to 0. As the third step, we compute the difference of the ciphertexts and compute the differences backwards for R2 rounds. As the last step, we compute the difference transitions for the middle R1 rounds while solving equations. Our attack will rely on 2 important observations on the 3-bit S-box. The first observation is that for each valid non-zero difference transition, the inputs conforming to such a transition will form an affine space of dimension 1, and the S-box will be freely linearized. This property also holds for the inverse. A second important observation is that for each non-zero input difference, its valid output differences must form an affine space of dimension 2. This also holds for its inverse. So with observation 2 in mind, we can now explain how to compute the difference transitions for the middle R1 rounds. The idea is very simple. So for these rounds, we can introduce intermediate variables to represent the output difference of each S-box. Then, according to the state differences computed backwards, we can construct equations in these variables. If the number of the variables is larger than the number of it's smaller than the number of equations, we can uniquely determine the difference transitions in the middle R1 rounds, and the correctness can be efficiently checked via the differential distribution table. Then we can compute the time complexity to enumerate difference as shown in this slide. So there are 2 advantages of the new strategy. First, the memory complexity is negligible. Second, it allows many possible differential trios to exist, which can enlarge the number of attacked rounds. However, we are then faced with a natural problem. That's how to find the correct trio among all the possible trios efficiently. Our solution to this problem is to efficiently check whether a possible differential trio implies a correct key. This will use observation 1. So from now on, let us focus on the value transitions. First, for the last R3 rounds, as all the S-boxes are inactive, we can introduce intermediate variables to represent the input bits of each S-box. S-box. Then according to observation 1, once the S-box is active, the S-box will be freely linearized, and there are 2 linear conditions on the output bits. So we can, supposing all the S-boxes are active in the middle rounds, we can extract many linear equations in terms of the key and the intermediate variables. Similarly, if the number of equations is larger than the number of variables, we can uniquely determine the key, and the correctness can be efficiently verified while the plain test, the cipher test pair. So, however, this will be case some there are inactive S-boxes. So we need to compute the complexity carefully, and we finally compute the time complexity to recover the key from all the trails. And indeed, the basic idea is very simple. However, it is very powerful. First, it allows us to break one instance of LMC whose block size is much larger than the key size. So as shown in the last row of this table. And second, it allows us to break 7 instances of LMCM. Then when applying our attack to the 4-round LMC with a 4 S-box layer used in Picnic 3, by refining the attack framework with and using the similar ideas to linearize the to extracting the linear equations from the active S-boxes and enumerating differences while solving equations, we can also break all the parameters. So you can find from this table that our attacks are much efficient than the exhaustive key search attack, and the memory complexity is negligible. So in concluding, the difference enumeration attack proposed at 2018 is significantly improved by exploiting some properties of the 3-bit S-box. Second, we break the LMC parameters with 2 children plain tests used in Picnic 3. Third, we break 7 instances of LMCM. At last, we have to emphasize that our attacks do not indicate Picnic 3 is broken because only one non-plain test, the cipher test, is known to the attacker. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can move on to the next talk, which will be given by Patrick Longa about the cost to break psych, comparative hardware-based analysis of AES and SHA-3. And it is in collaboration with Wen Wang and Jakub Sefer. And yeah, Peter Kutash. Patrick Longa will give the talk.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, this works presents an analysis of the cost to break psych in comparison with AES and SHA-3. And as mentioned, this is joint work with Wen Wang and Jakub Sefer. Right, let's start with a summary of the project. First of all, psych, that stands for supersingular arsenic key encapsulation, is an alternate candidate in the 3rd round of the NIST post-quantum cryptography standardization process. It is the only arsenic-based scheme in the competition. The harness, the security of the scheme is based on the harness of computing a large degree isogeny between 2 isogynous supersingular elliptic curves defined over a field of large prime characteristic. Now, the problem is that despite its solid security history, psych is penalized because its parameters are chosen very conservatively using a RAND model that doesn't take into account communication or memory costs. So what we do in this project is try to analyze the security of psych in comparison with AES and SHA-3, which are used to set the NIST security levels, using a more realistic budget-based cost model that takes into account both computing and memory costs. Now, the model is further improved by using historical price data and the use of a conservative projection of future costs. To assist this analysis, we also propose an efficient hardware architecture of the most intensive computation in the cryptanalysis of psych, that is the large degree isogeny computation. We use this architecture to model an ASIC-powered instance of the Van Orscott winner, or VOW, parallel collision finding algorithm. And this is the algorithm that is the most efficient one known today to cryptanalyze psych. Let me very briefly summarize the results that we obtained. Before this work, there were open questions about the suitability of some of the psych parameters to match the security levels. We answered that question in the affirmative. In our model, we show that the psych parameters are indeed matching the security levels, and they are conservative, and in fact, they offer a wide margin of security. Taking advantage of this margin, we go a step further and then propose new parameters that fit more closely the NIST targets. These new parameters are still chosen conservatively, and we also report software implementations of these new parameters that showcase the significant gains that could be obtained in execution time and bandwidth. Okay, let's go a little bit deeper in the explanation of the project. To set the NIST security levels in the classical case, a simple approach is followed that is based on the query complexity and the oracle cost. Specifically, the oracle cost is taken in terms of classical gate complexity. What are the disadvantages of this approach is that sometimes it can be inadequate to establish relative security strength between certain primitives, especially if the cryptanalysis of these primitives require large amounts of memory. And that's precisely the case of psych. Now let me briefly mention the history of parameter selection for psych. In round 2 and 3, we switched to an analysis that was based on the vintage Van Oorschot-Wiener algorithm. It was switched from using meet-in-the-middle attack that in round 1 was used, but that required large amounts of unrealistic amounts of memory. Now, in the issue with the Van Oorschot-Wiener algorithm, you can see the execution time that is shown in the screen requires, it has a memory parameter there that is called W. And for simplification purposes, that parameter was fixed to 2 to the 80. We can already mention a couple of problems with that analysis. First of all, there is no fundamental reason to fix W to 2 to the 80. And second, in some cases, the security estimates obtained with the analysis were still below the NIST classical gate requirements. So what we do is to try to address these problems with a budget-based cost model. Basically, what it does is fix a budget for the attacker, distribute the money to get both computing and storage resources, such a way that the time to break the algorithm is minimized. And then the security of the scheme is estimated as the time it takes to break it. This approach has been already used in the literature before, but we improve it as I mentioned at the start of the presentation. Now, very briefly, let me jump to a summary of the results that we obtained. We did an analysis for many budgets up to $1 trillion. Here, to illustrate the results, I show the case of $100 billion. In the graph, you can see on the y-axis the logarithm of the number of years that it takes to break an algorithm or primitive. And then the x, we do the analysis for the years between 2000 up to 2040. So in red, you can see the security estimates for AES corresponding to levels 1, 3, and 5 as defined by NIST. And then the corresponding psych parameters are in blue. And as you can see, as promised, we show that in our model, the psych parameters do fulfill these requirements. In fact, they offer a very wide margin of security. So taking in advantage of this wide margin is that we try to find parameters that follow more closely the NIST security levels, and you can see the new parameters that are shown in blue also with the label new in the graph. All right, so just to finish this presentation, I want to show some results that show the performance of the potential performance of the new parameters in comparison with the round 3 parameters. In this table, you can see the performance on the right of the alternative parameters that we propose. On the left, the round 3 parameters. You can see that in terms of bandwidth, we obtain a very nice reduction. The PK column, in terms of bytes, we can see a reduction that arguably could make psych even more attractive in terms of bandwidth. And then we also show the performance in millions of cycles. Again, a very nice reduction. For example, for level 1, we show a speed up of about 1.4 times in performance, which it's a very welcome speed up given that psych is relatively slow. And with that, I want to finish this presentation. For more details, you can check out our full paper version that is available on ePrint, or also check out our GitHub repository that contains our hardware implementations that we use for the analysis, and also the software implementations of the new parameters. Thank you.
Thank you. We can move to the third talk and the last talk of this session, which is about improved torsion point attacks on side variants. The talk will be given by Peter Kutash, and it is in collaboration with Victoria Dequin, Chris Leonardi, Chloe Martindale, Laurence Pani, Christophe Petit, and Catherine Stanger.
Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you. Yeah. So hi, I'm Pierre Kutash, and I'm going to talk about improved torsion point attacks on SIDH variants, which, as stated before, is a joint work with Victoria Dequin, Chris Leonardi, Chloe Martindale, Laurence Pani, Christophe Petit, and Catherine Stanger. So isogeny-based crypto is based on the hardness of finding isogenies between supersymmetric curves. But most crypto systems are based on weaker assumptions, or at least seemingly weaker assumptions. So it's important to study these new and different hard problems. Especially in SIDH, there's the issue of torsion point images, and the fact that the starting curve is special in a sense. And one can look at the following problem, which we dubbed the SSIT problem, which is a variant of the CSSI problem, is that let phi be an isogeny going from E to EA of known degree A, which is secret. And suppose furthermore that you know phi PB and phi QB, where PB and QB generate the B torsion of the starting curve E. And the problem is to compute the isogeny phi. And our main goal is to give certain conditions on A, B, and P, where P is the characteristic of the underlying field, on when we can solve this problem, either in polynomial time, or at least when can we be generic algorithms which don't use torsion points at all. There is a very important previous work in this direction by Petit from 2017 AsiaCrypt, which provides a polynomial time algorithm for this problem whenever B is bigger than P squared A squared. So what are the key ideas of our work? So the main idea is to utilize the endomorphism ring of the starting curve in a certain fashion. Namely, look for an endomorphism, a theta, and some integer d, such that phi theta phi hat plus d, which we dub as tau, has the special property that this degree is very close either to B squared or to B squared P, meaning that it's either B squared E or B squared P times E, where E is small. And if that's the case, then we show that you can compute tau. And from tau, you can actually recover the isogeny phi quite easily by looking at the intersection of the kernel of tau minus d with the A torsion of the target curve, which will give you essentially the dual of phi. So the key and hard problem here in this approach is how do you find such an endomorphism theta? And we deal with the special case where the starting curve has J invariant 1728, which is essentially used in most applications. And then this problem reduces to certain quadratic Diophantine equations. And the key here is when we can solve them efficiently. And our main result is a polynomial time algorithm for the case where either B is bigger than square root of P times A squared, or B is bigger than P times A. And of course, so these are polynomial time solutions, but one can look at again as to exponential time algorithms, which are still better than generic meet in the middle algorithms. And then parameters can actually be relaxed. So let me show you two diagrams of how this attack compares to Petit's original work. So in this diagram, you have two axes, alpha and beta, where A is modeled as being equal to P to the alpha and B is modeled as P to the beta. And you want certain conditions between alpha and beta, and then you can solve the problem in polynomial time, which is represented by a red line in the red area, and or just being better than generic attacks, which is represented by the orange line in the bottom. And there are two special dotted lines connecting the line connecting the two ones corresponds to SIDH-like parameters, where A times B is roughly P. And the dotted line connecting the two twos corresponds to B-side-like parameters, which is a variant of SIDH, where P square is equals to A times B, or is roughly A times B. I emphasize that these are like SIDH-like and B-side-like parameters because they're not necessarily balanced as in SIDH or B-side. This was the situation in Petit's work, and as you can see, our work has substantially improved the original method of Petit. As you can see, a much larger portion of the parameter space is covered. So you have the same notations. Red line and above is polynomial time attacks. Orange and above is better than generic attacks. And then there's an extra yellow line, which we analyzed in this work, which are better than known quantum attacks. And as you can see, our work affects certain unbalanced choices of SIDH and B-side-like parameters. So the main highlight of our work is a polynomial time break whenever A times B is roughly P and B is bigger than A to the fifth, which breaks a certain group key exchange with 6 or more parties, which was deemed to be secure for 400 parties. We also proposed a different line of work. So all previously mentioned work supposes that the starting curve is very special with J invariant 1728, but one can ask the question whether what happens if an adversary is allowed to choose the starting curve? Can one specifically design starting curves for which one can solve the SSIT problem or break SIDH in polynomial time, or at least faster than generic algorithms? And whenever B is bigger than A squared, then the answer is affirmative. Then there is a polynomial time algorithm, so one can actually construct these special starting curves from which one can solve SSIT in polynomial time. And note that this condition is completely independent of P. So all previous conditions involve P, but this only uses the unbalance between B and A. Furthermore, if even for balanced parameters, meaning that where A is roughly the same size as P, one can construct these special backdoor curves from which one can solve SSIT at least faster than meet in the middle. And we also counted these curves, and we believe that these backdoor curves are hard to distinguish from random curves. So in conclusion, we have provided significant improvements in previous algorithms to break a group key exchange with 6 or more parties. We also provided implementation for that. We introduced the concept of backdoor curves. And the main takeaway from our result is that you shouldn't use severely unbalanced parameters in SIDH. So SIDH is fine because SIDH uses balanced parameters. And you shouldn't trust starting curves coming from unknown or shady sources. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can move on to the Q&A session. There's already a question in the chat, which is for Patrick Longa. The question is, in the graph that shows the estimated psych versus AS attack costs over time, the slope for psych was slightly different from the slope for AS. And what's the reason for that?
Yeah, so well, in the graph we show, to recall, we show the analysis for different years. So we go from 2000 up to 2040, and as the time evolves, then it becomes slightly easier to attack psych, and yeah, and that's why you see relatively, faster degradation and security as the time goes.
Okay. So maybe I'll ask you a question as well. So I don't know that area very well, but you use the Van Schut-Wiener collision search as your basis. There exist, in principle, quantum collision search algorithms. Would they did you not consider them? Would they not help for your attack?
Sorry, you said quantum.
Sorry,
collision algorithm.
you use the Van Wiener parallel
Yeah.
collision search algorithm. How would quantum collision search behave? Of course, there are issues because it depends how you treat quantum memory, but would that be relevant at all or not at all?
Yeah, so in the paper, we analyze the classical case. That's why we mostly focus on the Bao algorithm. For the quantum algorithms, we rely on the analysis done by other authors, experts in quantum security and quantum algorithms. So we basically use a state-of-the-art analysis that has been done for SIDH and Psych. And we do a summary in our work, showing all the state-of-the-art results and take that into account to still show that the Psych parameters are safe to use with those in the case of the quantum algorithms. But we don't do that analysis in the paper.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, thank you. There's actually another question for you in the Zoom chat, which points out that sometimes you have estimates that it would take at a certain point in time, it might take a very long time to solve the problem, but 20 years later, it might take not the same time, -20. It might take actually much less than that, which seems inconsistent, right? So at time n, you would have an estimate that is E, and then at time t plus 20, you have an estimate that is less than E minus 20. Does that make sense?
Okay, I see. And why is that considered inconsistent? I don't get the...
Because if in 20 years, so the example, if in 20 years you can break it in a million years, then right now you could make it in a million years plus 20. So
okay.
If your estimate right now is trillion years, that's the example that's given, then...
Okay.
So I don't, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I think the question goes in the direction of then why don't we wait those 20 years and run the attack from there? Okay, I see. So yeah, that's possible if the attacker wants to do that. And now I should mention at this point that all these models, even though they try to approximate reality, they are far-fetched, still very far from reality. So what we try, so in any of these models that try to approximate security, we have to consider that there is some parameter or variable that is completely unrealistic. So for example, in our model, you can see that, yeah, you take the point of view of the attacker, then you assume you have certain budget, and then measure the time that it takes to break the algorithm. But because these are cryptographically strong algorithms, it's going to take millions of years to break it, and that's of course unrealistic, right? You can turn the tables and then assume that, for example, you have unrealistic amounts of money to try to achieve realistic timelines. But again, there is always in the model something that is going to be totally unrealistic, right? And that's the way it is, right? The only thing that we want to do is to try to take a more, from my perspective, natural approach, taking the point of view that the attack has to be realized either today or let's say in a few decades from now, and then try to have a sense of the strength of the algorithm by estimating the resources that would be required to run that attack. But again, yeah, at some point there should be some kind of convention because, as I said, whatever model you use is going to be to a certain degree unrealistic.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess maybe you could say that you estimate how long the attack would take if it used the technology from that date. If you started at that date with the technology available at that date.
Oh yeah, we try to do a projection of the kind of technology that can be available, and follow the, for example, Moore's law to track the improvements in technology that could be expected in some years from now. If you go more than a few decades, then I suppose it's extremely hard to do any reasonable estimates. But we still assume that our estimates are conservative because Moore law is degrading with time, right? It's slowing down, and that's what have been seen in the last few years. So we take into account that to assume that our estimates can be seen as conservative.
Okay, thank you very much. We're actually we're reaching the end of the session. Maybe I'd just like to ask a really quick question to let me check, to the other speakers. So Fukang Liu, just a quick question. Your attack is in some way similar to attacks that use the targeted ciphers with partial linear layers. Do any of your ideas, could they be like sort of backported to the cryptanalysis of ciphers with partial nonlinear layers? So in other words, your attack has some similarities. Could some of your ideas be applied to those ciphers as well? Or are they too specific to LOMC?
Apply to what?
So some of your attacks, although they apply to LOMC, they are similar to attacks, to ideas that were used to cryptanalysis, for the cryptanalysis of generally ciphers with partial nonlinear layers. So could some of your ideas be applied to other ciphers with partial nonlinear layers?
Yeah. I think it can be applied to the general design strategy. So using a partial nonlinear, but the critical, so the main advantage of our attack is to utilize some important properties of the 3-bit S-box. So if you want to attack the general, so the general design strategy maybe so you can just follow the original difference enumeration attack. So that in that where the property of the S-box is not utilized. So yeah.
I see. So you rely on the 3-bit S-box. Okay. Thank you. It makes sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Maybe a quick question for Peter Kutash. So I really don't know anything about isogenes, so it might be a very naive question, but is there any hope that your attack applies to SIDH, but not the basic one, some variants of it? Is there any hope that it could apply, could be modified to apply to SIDH, or is that completely out of the question?
That's a hard question. So far we are a little bit far away from balanced SIDH parameters, but the improvement is quite vast. So the jump from the original attack to this one was quite a big one, but we're still quite far away. So I don't know. So it depends. So we're still so there are not too many unbalanced variants in the literature. There are some, and people keep suggesting new variants with unbalanced. But I would advise against those, because I think we are getting quite close to let's say parameters where B is only like roughly the size of A square or something like that. Plus, there is a variant of SIDH which somehow uses a random starting curve, which would counteract these types of attacks. That is very far away with these attacks. I don't think these attacks pose a security concern at the moment for Psych, but at least might lead to the fact that Psych might have to switch to say a starting curve which is generated at random in the not so near future, I would say. But that might be too optimistic.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much. So there's actually one last question, but we're already 5 minutes over the limit. So maybe it's a question for Patrick Longa. Maybe you could answer it in the Zoom chat, if that's okay. With my apologies to Watson Lab.